Greetings, Mr. Del Prado's science students. It is Thursday, November 11th. I am sure that you're not thrilled with me right now that I'm having you look at an Ed puzzle of me talking, as if me talking isn't enough. But listen, I'll try to keep it short and sweet. You can see what the time is at the bottom. So the idea, I think, for the next couple of days is I'll talk to you a little bit and then maybe set you free on your own to like just do a couple things with the cell membrane. So when you see this a title on the slide here, it says cell transport. What it really means is we're going to take a closer look at the cell membrane and how the cell gets molecules in and out of it. I know that I talked about it earlier, but we're going to take a little deeper dive into it. The Keystone exam wants you to know the structure of the molecules in there and how important molecules get in and out of your cell. And for some of you out there, it might actually be kind of fascinating because you can kind of see how the cell works and takes in molecules that kind of allow you to live. So that's what this unit is going to be. It's going to be small, it's going to be short, and I'm hoping that we wrap it up before Thanksgiving so that you get time to spend with your family and not listening to Mr. Dell talk about phospholipid bilayer. So this first slide, if you want to look at the bottom for you visual learners out there, that's a squid. And the cool thing at the bottom here, if you look at it, you can see, right, there's like ink that is like going in and out of the cells there. Well, that ink has to get through the squid's like cell membrane. So it actually has little transport mechanism to get the ink like in and out of the squid. I'm sure you've seen squid like turn, or octopus like turn colors, or squid like actually ink something. Well, part of the way that they do it is they're able to take those molecules and bring them into their cells. Another way to think about molecules moving in and out of the cells is homeostasis. That is, you know, we need water, we need food, we need to get those things into the cell so the cell can actually work. And the phospholipid bilayer, that cell membrane, kind of allows us to bring those molecules in and then get rid of any junk that our cells have so that our cells don't, poison themselves. Now, so for examples of stuff, I feel like I just went through it, but I'll give you some of the big ones. The big ones would be glucose, right? The food that you eat eventually gets broken down to glucose in your digestive system. Then that glucose has to get into your cell. Water's a really good one. Oxygen is another really good one. There's also proteins that need to get into your cell as well. Other types of carbohydrates that need to get into your cell. I feel like that's a fair amount of examples of molecules that need to get in or out of your cell. All right, so back to this. We've seen it before. We're just taking a little deeper dive. Most of the cell membrane, most of it, it's that thing that looks like a mattress and it has two layers. So it's called like a lipid bilayer because it actually has two layers to it. Most of it is made of this molecule right here, which is the phospholipid, okay? It has that phosphate head, and then it has the two lipid tails. And this is where I talked about it before, but now I'm going to come at you a little bit with it. The phosphate head is polar. It mixes with water. This is important because let's say that this is a cell. The outside of your cell would be blood. Well, okay, the blood is a fair amount of water. So if we need to take molecules and bring them to your cell, having the outside of the cell membrane kind of mix with blood, that's a good thing. The inside of your cell, also made of a fair amount of water. So it's also good to have these phosphate groups on the inside of the cell so that a molecule, and you can just follow my little arrow here, like a molecule can get up close to the cell membrane, and then we got to figure out, how to get it out of the cell. The lipid tails are nonpolar. That means they don't have any charge to them. They're kind of like the opposite of water. All right. And so they're said to be hydrophobic. The heads are hydrophilic. They mix with water. The tails are hydrophobic. And what that means is they don't just let anything in that comes in with water. It gets bounced here unless it's really small. But this whole thing is called the phospholipid bilayer. Real small molecules like water, carbon dioxide, and oxygen, they can slide right in and right out. But there's other molecules that we need to bring into the cell membrane that are bigger. And so we're going to utilize some other things that are in the cell membrane other than just the phospholipid bilayer. I hope that makes sense to you. So what are these other things? So look, here's another look at the mattress, right? Here's the cell membrane. You can see the phospholipid bilayer there. And then you can see a whole bunch of stuff sticking out of this that looks confusing and scary. Anything that's like, remember I'm colorblind. I think this looks purple, light purple to me. Anything that looks purple or light purple, those are proteins. Sometimes the proteins are just embedded into the membrane. Sometimes they go all the way through the membrane. And sometimes you can have proteins just kind of sticking off the top of the membrane. And these proteins all do different things. So you can see here's a globular protein that's kind of embedded in the membrane, a fibrous protein, and then you can have some of these proteins that have carbohydrates sticking on them. Those are glycoproteins. Those things act as receptors. So Mr. Dell, who does what? Who are the big players in this? Here they are. You ready? These are the major players I'd like you to know in the cell membrane. I think these are the important ones, other than the phospholipids. So the phospholipid's the majority of that. Look, you can look down here. It's mostly phospholipid. But I'd like you to know some other players. Okay? You can have glycoproteins. That's part protein, part carbohydrate. Okay? Here's an example of one right there. All right? These things can act as a whole bunch of different things in the cell. They can act as receptors and grab things and pull them into the cell. They can also be used, they're also called cell surface proteins, and they can be used to like have one cell touch another cell and say like, hey, I'm this type of cell. Are you this type of cell too? If we are these types of cells, maybe we could work together. It's kind of a way that some cells can communicate with each other, not just act as a receptor, but can also touch one another and tell other cells what type of cells they are. It's really quite simple and quite brilliant all at the same time. Okay, so there's cell surface markers, and there's receptor proteins. They both can kind of look like this a little bit. Okay, they can both kind of be sticking out of the cell a little bit. There's enzymes that are in the cell membrane as well. I don't know, do we see any enzymes here in the cell membrane? I don't know if I see any. That's okay. Enzymes are proteins as well. You might remember that from our biochem unit. They can be sitting on the cell membrane as well. And sometimes if something comes close to the cell membrane, enzymes on top of the cell membrane can take it, break it down into something smaller, and then move it across the cell membrane, like from the outside of the cell to the inside of the cell. And then the big player, the one I think is the simplest to understand, are the transport proteins. They go all the way through the cell membrane, and they help really, really big molecules. Glucose, you can think any type of protein. They can help those molecules move in and out of the cell. They're just too big to get through the cell, the phospholipid bilayer, so they move through these transport proteins. By the way, for anybody who cares about this, there's cholesterol in your cell membrane as well that helps stabilize the membrane. So for those of you who think that cholesterol is just a bad thing, if you took it out, your cell membrane would actually collapse. So you have to have some carbohydrate in your body because your cell membrane uses it to kind of stabilize the mattress to make sure it doesn't break apart. Here's a little video we have of like what might happen in the cell membrane. There's the top of the cell membrane. You can see the top of protein channels, like letting molecules in and moving molecules through. You can see most of the color there. It's mostly going to be phospholipids, but it's a nice look at a transport protein that moves molecules in and out of the cell. Okay, what are the roles of proteins in the cell? Well, they can act as receptors. They can act as cell identification markers. They can act as enzymes, and then they can also be transport proteins. And I think those are the big things that I'd like you to know today. The basic structure of the cell membrane, the phospholipid bilayer, phosphate head, lipid tails, and then what are the major roles of the proteins, and I think I just outlined them to you right there. So there you have it. A little under 9 minutes, not bad for my first try. I hope I didn't bore you too much, and hopefully I'll see or hear you tomorrow in class. Take care. Thanks.